Coming up on Theater Talk.
My last daughter is going to get married in October. After
Oh, nice.
Very nice.
And so I'm using this experience as practice of how not to do it.
Theater Talk is made possible in part by the CUNY TV Foundation.
So enjoy all the time there is. If you're his, be his. Make each day your own.
From New York City, this is Theater Talk. I'm Susan Haskins.
And I'm Michael Riedel of the New York Post. You know, Susan, it feels like a kind of a college reunion here at Theater Talk, because all of our guests tonight have been on the show a number of times, and they have now come together working on a new Broadway musical, an absolutely superb musical called The Visit by John Kander and Fred Ebb. I believe it was the last music that John and Fred wrote before Fred died, and we are delighted tonight to be joined by the star of The Visit, the legendary Chita Rivera. Welcome back to Theater Talk. It's good to see you.
Wonderful to be here. Thank you.
And John Kander, who we always think of you with Freddie Ebb, and we always miss Fred when you're.
I miss him too.
Welcome to Theater Talk. And another good friend of ours, the great director John Doyle, who has taken The Visit after many years and brought it to this great production on Broadway. Welcome to Theater Talk.
Thank you.
And yet another old friend, Roger Rees, one of the great, great stage actors. Welcome to Theater Talk.
And film and television.
I know, but we think of Roger here in Theater Talk as being a master of the stage.
Thank you.
Take us back, John, when you and Fred, if I remember correctly, used to meet at Fred's apartment.
Right.
Around the Formica kitchen
The kitchen table, that's right.
and that's where you would talk out the shows. What was the idea for the Visit? That morning you got around, sat at the kitchen table and said, we want to do this Friedrich Dürrenmatt play.
Actually, the Visit, which is a play that we had talked about but hadn't gotten serious about, was brought to us by Barry Brown.
Yes.
And the idea for it and the fact that I think he had the rights and I know we said yes right away, because it was one of those pieces that you don't just adapt a play because it's a play. I think we felt there was a new element we could bring into it, and it fascinated us. And we had a wonderful time writing it. I mean that. The piece is so generative, and this was a long time ago.
Yeah, and we should say missing from the table is Terrence McNally, who's done the adaptation. When you say that you were attracted to it, is it because you and Fred were always attracted to sort of a darker subject matter in a lot of your shows?
I think it was just because the elements of the piece were so interesting. Being dark is a blessing and a curse. Shall I just rattle on?
You can rattle away. You're John Kander.
You know, it's wonderful. I'm hearing so many things that I have never heard before.
Yeah,
so it's really exciting to hear this.
The thing about the play, which I saw with the Luntz and loved, Dürrenmatt was very intent on making his very nasty message about the Swiss matter.
Yep.
And the situation is very much the same as it is in our piece, except we wanted to examine the relationship between the two lovers, ex-lovers. So most of our attention was spent examining their feelings about each other, which aren't that clear in the play itself.
Right. Well, we should say for anyone who hasn't seen the play, or doesn't know the play, it's about a woman who's now wealthy, and she goes back to the town she grew up in, and she's bent on getting even with the man who jilted her when they were young lovers. And Chita plays the woman who, I don't think of her as a villainess. I mean, she has her own particular point of view.
I think that I have a great amount of similarity with this woman. I seem to understand what she's getting at. The passion that she has, the love that she has kept for this man, but the fact that she wants the truth told. And her way of going about it is not very ordinary.
No.
No, but it's very European, and it's straight to the point. It's not American, where we like to have our happy endings. This is, she deals with it the way she wants. But the brilliant thing, one of the many brilliant things about this is that thanks to John Doyle, what Dürrenmatt has said, he puts right into the hands and to the lap of the audience. And it makes the audience really think about, would I do this? Is this the choice that I would make? Also, I was just telling my daughter this morning, I don't know how many times I say to my sweet Roger over there, we're both old. And so I said to Lisa, I guess this is God's way of making me face the truth. You know, in this play. This play has come to me, and even though Angela Lansbury was asked to do it originally, but her husband passed away and she couldn't do it, I'm very grateful that it came into my lap.
And what attracted you to it, John? You weren't with it originally, right?
No, I
You
wasn't.
come late
No,
to this.
Frank Gallardi did the first production of it, which I didn't see. I wasn't here at that time, and it came to me completely by chance, actually. Well, two strands. You did a benefit, didn't you? Like a one night.
Yeah, Broadway Cares.
Yeah. Was that for the Vineyard? Was that who that? Or it was for Broadway Cares?
Broadway Cares.
I was approached to see if I would do that, and I looked at the material then, and I thought, this is great, but I don't want to do it in like 2 weeks or for one night. I just didn't, I felt there was such a lot to mine and look at in there. So, that was nice to be asked. And then I was on an airplane a couple of years later, and Tom Corday, who's the producer of this, he and I were on the same airplane. We knew each other. We were in different parts of the plane.
He was in the back.
He was
in
at the
coach.
front. I was up. And I went to the men's room on the airplane, and we went, oh, hi, Tom, hi, John. And he there and then said, do you know The Visit? I said, well, I know the play. He said, no, do you know Terence, John, Fred's musical? I said, well, I have looked at it once. I think it's great. He said, could we talk? And, you always think, oh, well, I'll never hear another word about that. That was a lovely encounter, but bye.
Back to coach.
Yeah, But actually, he really did pursue that. And then it became the possibility of doing it at Williamstown, where we put it together for the first time. Well, John and Terence and I met up first. It did have a few sequences. We met up, and I did a little workshop production, 10 evenings rehearsal, down at Pace University with the students, where I did a kind of edit on it, didn't I, John? It pushed it into the one act that it is now, from being a two-act musical, with kids that were like 19. They didn't understand a lot of it. But that's unfair. But they brought a lot to it, and it gave us an opportunity to look at another way of doing it. It was only very, very tiny, semi-staged, but it gave a clue, and it particularly brought up some themes about how much the young parts of their lives could be on stage with them all the time, and what that could do. So that was the beginning of the journey of it, really.
That was astonishing, too. And that whole concept, it was much easier than saying, let me explain to you what I want to do. He just showed us.
Right.
That's
It was
right.
brilliant.
Now, Roger, I never think of you as a musical theater guy. I think of you as a great Royal Shakespearean actor.
What
Nicholas
happened?
Nick-
What
I know.
happened?
Who knew you could sing? Have you always wanted to be I wouldn't exactly say a song and dance man, since it's not that kind of a show, but...
A wonderful thing happened. I was offered this part at Williamstown, and I've always wanted to be on stage with Chita. I've always wanted to be one of John Doyle's actors.
But you don't play a trumpet.
I know, I was going to say.
I may as well say it before anybody else does.
You should say John is famous for his production where the actors play all the instruments.
But I never thought I would be in that group. I said, on condition that I would take the part if I could sing with John, so he could hear my voice, so he would be reassured that I could sing. I went to his house and we had some donuts and coffee and things, and then he sat at the piano and started to play a few notes, and I sang them, and then he played a couple of bits of music. And I was in heaven, because do you understand? There was John Kander playing the piano and I was singing.
Yeah.
It was.
How was his voice, John, then?
It was immediate. I mean, he was a natural for this, really.
It was a joyous step in my entire life. Just
We had a good
creatively.
time.
Yeah, we had a good time and lots of donuts.
How far back, if I'm asked, do you and Chita go? Were you friends before Chicago, or did you guys know?
Well,
I mean, you, Freddie, and John. I mean, we associate together, Kiss the Spider Woman in Chicago.
Right. But I remember you in the pit of Zorba playing for me because you guys asked me if I would replace that wonderful girl that was the leader in Zorba.
And then she did. You did it on tour, actually.
With John Ray.
And it was the first and only time that part became a dancing role.
Yeah.
It was it really.
She was
that's one of
fabulous.
my favorite scores, and it was an extraordinary experience playing with John. And I don't know, John. Somebody asked me that before, and I can't remember exactly where you, Freddie, and I.
Well, I think you may have met Fred before, because it seems to me I met you, actually met you when you were doing 1491. And
That's one of those we don't talk about.
Wow. I've never heard it. Have you heard of 14?
Everything is experience.
And no, we were asking. We were asking if you would do it, if you would do something.
That was then. Yes. Yeah.
There was a musical called 1491.
1491.
Yes.
Were you Isabella?
Yes, I was.
Of course.
So you saw the show, you thought, yeah, not so much of the show, but that woman, Chita Rivera, she's good.
Well, actually, we came out to try and talk her into doing this.
Goodness.
Wow.
So
Amazing.
now, The Visit has this very creepy set, very beautiful but dark and creepy. And speaking of dark and creepy things, somebody called me and said, you must ask Roger Rees about the ghost at the theater.
You know, Bob Fosse did Eliza was a Z at that theatre.
Yeah.
Filmed that with.
Yes.
And that's the association. But Chita and I, of course, she's worked miraculously with him and so often. But I did a film called Star 80.
Of course, yeah.
And I played Peter Bogdanovich.
Right.
And he just very quickly, he did it for everyone. But on close-ups, he'd be by the camera and he'd be smoking, and you'd say, Mary had a little lamb. Its fleece was white as snow. That's what you say. So, Mary had a little lamb. Pause. Don't act, Roger. Don't act.
Is that what he's saying in the Lyceum to you?
Great.
But that's what you say too. So it's so good. So it's great. No, it's this great man, and just a feeling.
Doesn't
So you
hang out
feel-
at that
You don't. He's
theater.
not at the Lyceum. He would be hanging out at the
pick the
Carnegie Deli.
Lyceum.
That's where he would be hanging out of anywhere, right?
Yeah.
Well,
And
no,
how do
but
you feel about Bob Fosse looking over
Oh,
your
I wouldn't
shoulder?
mind Bob Fosse looking over my shoulder at all.
So you don't think that cigarette smoke you're smelling is
No.
really from Bob Fosse? All right.
No, that's the sandwiches the staff are cooking. And
The show is called The Visit at the Lyceum Theater, haunted by Bob Fosse, some might say. Starring the great Chita Rivera, written by John Kander with the great lyricist Fred Ebb. Book by Terrence McNally, who's not here, but he's always welcome on Theater Talk. Directed by John Doyle, and also starring Roger Rees.
Thank you.
We wish you a long and prosperous run. May you die many times at the Lyceum Theater, Roger. I hate to say it, but there you go.
That's very good.
Thank you very much.
He's got a tattoo. Do you have a tattoo, Marty? No. It should have been you.
A happy surprise of this season on Broadway is It Should Have Been You, a mad, funny, and very sweet new musical about the most dreaded and stressful of rituals, the big family wedding. Joining us are Brian Hargrove, the show's book writer and lyricist, David Hyde Pierce, who directed it, and two of its wonderful performers, Harriet Harris and Tyne Daly, who play the mothers of the groom and bride.
David, this is not your directorial debut, but directorial debut on Broadway, I believe.
That's correct. Yeah.
Is this what you always wanted to do, and that little pesky acting career got in the way before you decided to do what your first passion, directing?
That's right. I'm a slow starter. And I loved and love acting, and had never really thought about directing seriously until this piece came along, and it needed a director, and I loved it. This is back when we were doing it about 3 years ago at the George Street Playhouse.
Right.
It ended up
Right.
being our out-of-town production, and it was my introduction to directing, and I really enjoyed it.
Did it come along as something for you to be in, or did somebody come to you and say, we think of you as the director for this piece?
No, what happened was because Brian had written it, I had been part of it going to readings and workshops for years, and then Casey Nicholaw was set to direct it and was offered Book of Mormon. And so
he thought that would do what a mistake!
Inexplicably. Well, we'll see how it plays out. But at the time, having Casey with his track record was a big draw for producers, and so they're kind of looking for a name because we hadn't really cast the show yet. And like I said, I sort of responded to it and thought, I think I could direct this. So I volunteered and said, I'm sort of a name. Not as a director, but for other crimes.
Yes, you are sort of a name. But what's so interesting to me, though, is that you're such a brilliant comedian, and then this brilliant timing is reflected in your direction of the show.
So, Harriet and Tyne, how is he as a director?
Oh, God.
Honesty is our policy here at Theater Talk.
He's a wonderful director, and I think any of us would be thrilled to work with David as a director again. He's a very light touch, and he's very funny. It's fun to be in rehearsal with him. Mm-hmm. He doesn't draw too much attention to flaws. He lets things develop, and if they're developing in a really bad way, he'll put a stop to it. But it's very instructive, and you are reminded of his sensibility in a beautiful way.
And your feeling about that, Tyne?
Smart, real patient. Which is the part, that I'm always amazed about, because I want to say to people, just do it. So he's patient, and he lets people find their way, and makes us a company. He's made us into a company in a fairly short time.
Yeah, it's a wonderful cast. I mean, you've got the A-list of Broadway performers. Brian, give us the story behind this piece. What got you thinking about writing this particular story?
Well, Barbara Anselmi, the composer, was at the BMI workshop, which is sort of like I call it the Juilliard of people who want to write for musical theater. And she was a composer. In their second year, they had to do an original musical. And I didn't know her at the time. And she had been to a bunch of weddings one summer and thought, well, it'd be fun to do a musical about a wedding. She didn't know what it was, but she got 16 lyricists to all write a song about someone at a wedding, not the bride and groom. And so they did the songs, and in class, and It Shoulda Been You was written, and someone said, so what happens? And she said, I don't know, but I want to know. And I heard her music, and I loved it, and I said to her, she was working with someone at the time, I said, well, let's find something to do, because I love your music. And she called up, I don't know, a few months later and said, this other person, it's not working out for us, and so would you do it? And I said, well, if the idea of going to see a musical about a wedding makes me physically ill. But if I can think of
going to a wedding makes me physically ill, frankly.
But if I can think of a story that would interest me at the wedding, that's going on while the wedding's happening, then I will do it. And about 3 months later, I was walking down the street, and it hit me. And then I called her. I said, let me pitch it to you. We met for lunch, and after that, we were sailing.
It's kind of interesting, though, not to give away we don't want to give away the
concept
or the twist. But there's something that I was thinking about, that a wedding, you do present your best front to everybody, but it's not always your most truthful front. I mean, a wedding is a show, and you're playing parts in it. And that's one of the things I thought that kind of comes through. I don't know if you've thought about that thematically, or if I'm just being a critic here, analyzing too much.
One thing we have noticed is that backstage at a wedding is very much like backstage in the theater. So, I mean, you nailed it, really. It's all about things that are going. The show is about things that are going on behind what you see when people interact. So you can sort of get both things happening.
And then you have the wonderful wedding planner, director of your wedding, who's Edward Hibbard.
Right.
Just the concept of Edward Hibbert as wedding planner is very funny to me.
Yeah. Well, there's no one like him.
Oh, God,
really
no.
He's one of a kind, and he marches to his own drummer, and he's just fantastic.
You know,
I worked with him in Curtains.
Of course, yeah.
And of course, we worked with him on Frasier.
All right, so you guys are playing the mothers. Can you give me a sense of your character and what her concerns are about the wedding day?
She's trying to put on a good face, and she's sure that her daughter's marrying the wrong person, and she doesn't know who to tell that to. So her emotional condition is very dicey. She's trying to put the lovely face on it and wants to break into tears most of the time.
She senses it.
But weddings are not for the people that are getting married.
Mm-mm.
Weddings are not for the people that are getting married on base already are married. They know that. It's for the audience. It is like a movie. It's for the gathered company who's going to purportedly remind them of what they felt on that day. So I think that this setup is really clever because I know, having been married once and having had daughters that got married, and my last daughter is going to get married in October. After
nice.
And so I'm using this experience as practice of how not to do it once we get to it. But weddings they're very loaded with feelings.
Yes, and as you have it, the weddings are, from the bride and groom's perspective, for the parents.
Yeah.
And that's what makes
friends.
it so stressful because you just can't please them. How are you?
And Harriet,
Except for those brides, I think, who do think, I get one perfect day in my life. I get
The
that
deluded
one.
ones.
Yeah. Why can't this day be all about me? Why can't it go the way I want it to go? My son, I just feel like he shouldn't marry at all. He should just remain devoted to me. That's just
why
I should
another
be
woman?
enough.
Yeah.
I've always been enough.
By the time this airs, you'll be open. But I'm told that in rehearsal now that you're focusing on subtleties.
Smaller notes are sometimes harder to adjust to because you don't feel them the way you would feel a big note. And so something that you think is going to maybe take 10 minutes to do actually takes to about 45 minutes or something to incorporate and back into the show because you just go, but I thought I was doing that, or isn't that what? And so these last few days of rehearsal, we've been doing tiny, like 4 notes. Maybe we'll take up the entire rehearsal period as opposed to earlier when it was sort of like broad strokes and get the thing up there, and it's like couture.
Sometimes at this point, not just me but also Brian in the final editing in these last days of previews, the more the show is ready, the more these little moments stick out as that's just got too much weight, and you just let that go, just say it, or whatever it is, or maybe this needs one tiny line here to help set that up an hour later. And it's a real joy from our perspective to see those things and just do that and see how it affects a whole cascade of scenes.
And to cross those things that were bugging you a little bit off the list. And really was about 2 days before we froze it, maybe 1 day before we froze it. I think we both felt, oh, well, from a writing point of view, I think this is it. So this is what I'm happy. I love the show, and I love the cast, of course, but sort of my part of it was sort of done. And then I could just nag him about notes.
Yeah. And so next for you, David, is what, King Lear in Central Park this summer, director?
Yes, they don't know.
Playing,
that
he's
I'm
going to
doing
play
that,
and
though.
direct at the same time.
Yeah, well, that's right. He's going to do Lear and direct.
No, I am going to direct. I'm directing a new David Lindsay Bear play in the fall for Manhattan Theatre Club.
Right. Yeah, Tyne was telling us in the green room that she loves
So
the play.
jealous, green.
Yes,
envy.
yes.
It's
Tyne knows the
one I
play
yearn
very
for.
well. Yeah.
Ripcord, it's called?
Called Ripcord. Yeah, very funny.
So the bug has bitten. I mean, are you forever now in the dark, telling people what to do?
Sounds like that.
That's what I like to think of.
That sounds like so dirty. Excuse me, I just have to.
I didn't mean it that way.
He said he wouldn't ask questions like that.
Taxi cab confessions or something. Yeah, no, I will act again.
All right, the show is It Shoulda Been You, a charming new musical at the Brooks Atkinson Theater, written by Brian Hargrove. Thank you for being our guest on Theater Talk. Directed by David Hyde Pierce, giving Tommy Two now a run for his money.
And may I add that for those who don't know that Brian and David are married,
right.
and I hope that your marriage was nowhere. nothing like this in its stress.
No, our wedding, you mean? No, our wedding was very simple. It was him and me and 2 dogs. That was
All right.
it.
That's the only way to go.
Yeah.
And starring 2 of our favorite actresses, Harriet Harris and Tyne Daly. Thank you for being a guest tonight on Theater Talk.
Bravo, bravo.
They are amazing.
Even tried to turn him gay. Bought him Barbie and Skipper and Dawn. Let him know it was okay. And we played dress up with eye makeup on. I took him to everything Sondheim. Those halcyon days are all gone. He looks so cute in that sarong. Would that have been so wrong? How could he take on a wife? I am that girl and has a life. Did that sound a little strong? Where did I go wrong?
Our thanks to the Friends of Theater Talk for their significant contribution to this production. Theater Talk is made possible in part by the Frederick Lowe Foundation, the Corey and Bob Donnelly Charitable Fund, the Noel Coward Foundation, Carrie J. Fries, the Dorothy Strelson Foundation, plus public funds from the New York City Department of Cultural Affairs, and the New York State Council on the Arts, a state agency.
We welcome your questions or comments for Theater Talk. Thank you and good night.